My mother was truly a stage mother. She was very jealous because she had absolutely no talent. She would sort of stand in the wings when I was a little girl, and if I didn't feel good, if I was sick to my tummy, she'd say, "You get out and sing, or I'll wrap you around the bedpost and break you off short."
Glamorous Hollywood starlets, beloved screen icons, and timeless legends. Yet behind their perfect smiles lay a darker truth. These 20 mothers didn't guide their children to greatness. They weaponized motherhood itself. From psychological torture to physical abuse, from abandoned children to stolen fortunes, witnessed the most shocking maternal betrayals ever hidden from public view. Here's what really happened next. Number 20. Ethel Marion Milne didn't just abuse her daughter. She perfected the systematic destruction of a child through exploitation and chemical dependency. Judy Garland's voice was extraordinary, a gift that seemed almost supernatural in its emotional depth and range. But her mother saw only a paycheck. When MGM executives prescribed amphetamines to keep Judy energized on set and barbiturates to knock her unconscious at night, Ethel didn't rage against the studio. She enabled the exploitation, partnering directly with executives to maintain absolute authority over her daughter's chemically induced compliance. By age 10, Judy Garland was not just performing in films. She was chemically dependent on substances administered by adults she was supposed to trust. The pills kept her compliant. The pills kept her working. The pills kept the money flowing into her mother's accounts. Years spiraled into decades of addiction and psychological devastation. By 1969, Judy Garland was found dead in her bathroom from a barbiturate overdose, the direct result of addictions that had begun at age 10 under her mother's watch. Ethel Marion Milne had perfected the art of extracting maximum value from a child while systematically dismantling their psychological well-being in the process. Number 19. Joan Crawford's wire hangers became synonymous with maternal cruelty for a haunting reason. Christina Crawford grew up in a mansion surrounded by wealth and psychological imprisonment disguised as luxury. Life with Joan wasn't defined by warmth or unconditional love. It was defined by unpredictable rage and violence, designed not to discipline, but to dominate and humiliate. The infamous wire hanger beating emerged from Joan's discovery that wooden hangers had been replaced with cheaper alternatives, a transgression so minor it should have been forgotten. Instead, Crawford flew into a screaming fit and beat Christina repeatedly with the metal hangers. But this wasn't just about hangers. It was about establishing absolute power. It was about reminding Christina that nothing she did would ever be good enough. The beating itself was brutal, but the message was worse. You are mine to break whenever I choose. Beyond physical abuse, Joan engineered elaborate psychological torture through unpredictable late-night inspections, suddenly waking Christina to examine her hygiene, posture, and appearance. Any perceived deficiency resulted in cold showers, additional chores, or worse. These intrusions shattered any sense of safety in her own home. Household staff corroborated the excessive violence. When Christina finally revealed the truth through her memoir, she confirmed that the film adaptation hadn't exaggerated. The reality was far darker than Hollywood's dramatization. Number 18. Gertrude Temple failed in the most fundamental duty of motherhood, protection from predators. Shirley Temple was supposed to be Hollywood's most protected treasure, the world's sweetheart. Yet Shirley's life told a very different story behind those studio lights. When Shirley was alone in an office with MGM producer Arthur Freed at just 12 years old, he exposed himself to her. This wasn't an accident or miscommunication. This was calculated sexual harassment by a man in absolute power over a child. When Shirley told her mother what had happened, Gertrude didn't rage or pull her daughter from the industry. She didn't report the abuse or advocate fiercely for her child. Instead, she shared her own stories of attempted abuse and seemingly accepted this as simply the price of Hollywood success. This normalization of exploitation set the trajectory for Shirley's entire childhood. When a mother tells her child that her body is not hers to protect, that sexual abuse is part of the business, the damage becomes invisible but catastrophic. Unlike Margaret O'Brien's mother, who would famously stand up to Louis B. Mayer, Gertrude Temple chose submission over advocacy. Number 17. Lana Turner placed her teenage daughter directly in the path of violent men, prioritizing her romantic life over her child's safety. Johnny Stompanato was a violent mobster known for jealousy, rage, and physical brutality. Yet Lana continued the relationship, bringing him into her home where her teenage daughter lived. On the night of April 4, 1958, Stompanato became enraged, threatening to disfigure Lana's face and kill her, her daughter, and her own mother. In a desperate act of protection, 14-year-old Cheryl Crane grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen and confronted the man threatening to murder her family. Stompanato lunged at her, impaling himself on the blade. He died moments later. A 14-year-old girl had to protect her mother from a murderer. That wasn't Cheryl's job. That was Lana's responsibility as a parent. The coroner's jury ruled it justifiable homicide, but the psychological cost was irreversible. Cheryl was investigated, questioned, and nearly prosecuted for defending her family. The damage multiplied in the years that followed. Cheryl battled severe depression, multiple suicide attempts, and lifelong struggles with the knowledge that she had killed a man to save her mother's life. Number 16. Dinah Lohan monetized her daughter's destruction while claiming victimhood. Lindsay Lohan had genuine talent, but her mother saw only a walking ATM machine. She pushed Lindsay into relentless work schedules, denied her normal childhood, and exposed her to the industry's predatory culture without adequate protection. When Lindsay began self-medicating with drugs and alcohol in her early teens, Dinah's response wasn't intervention, it was enablement. Michael Lohan was an abusive alcoholic whose violent behavior terrorized the family. Rather than shielding Lindsay from this toxicity, Dinah allowed her daughter to witness years of paternal abuse before finally seeking legal protection. Lindsay internalized that love meant chaos, safety was temporary, and parental figures were unreliable. When Lindsay's drug addiction became public, Dinah didn't take responsibility. She publicly claimed victimhood, telling the press that teen drug addiction runs rampant and framing herself as a sympathetic parent. The industry destroyed Lindsay Lohan, but Dinah had handed her to them. Number 15. Ethel Chaplin's untreated mental illness became weaponized against her son. Charlie Chaplin created some of the most moving moments in cinema history, yet his childhood was a nightmare, orchestrated by a mentally unstable mother. Ethel had been a performer herself, but her career withered due to a weak voice and unstable temperament. She projected her failures onto her son, becoming obsessed with molding Charlie into the star she could never be. Her methods were rooted in emotional manipulation and psychological cruelty. Ethel's mental breakdowns were terrifying. She would swing from affection to rage without warning. One moment she'd shower Charlie with praise about his theatrical potential. The next, she'd descend into paranoid delusions or catatonic depression. Charlie never knew which version of his mother he'd encounter, so he learned to manipulate her moods, to perform constantly, to be what she needed to ensure her emotional stability. A child should never bear that responsibility. The poverty made it worse. Ethel's inability to maintain work meant the family lived in constant financial precarity. She would disappear into mental hospitals for extended periods, leaving Charlie unsupervised or in workhouses, experiencing deprivation and abandonment that would scar him forever. Number 14. Evelyn Fabares abandoned Sandra Dee to predators. Sandra's childhood was fractured from the beginning. When her mother remarried, she chose a man who would become Sandra's worst nightmare. Her stepfather systematically and repeatedly sexually abused her. Unlike mothers who fight to protect their children from predatory men in their homes, Evelyn either didn't recognize the abuse or chose not to acknowledge it. Either way, she failed catastrophically. Sandra endured years of sexual trauma at the hands of her stepfather, while her mother remained passive. By the time Sandra entered the entertainment industry as a teen model, and later as an actress, she was already psychologically fractured, already carrying the knowledge that the woman who was supposed to protect her had abandoned her to a monster. On screen, she played wholesome teenage girls. Off-screen, she was a traumatized young woman struggling with the fallout of childhood sexual abuse. Sandra attempted suicide multiple times and lived in constant anxiety. She developed severe eating disorders and battled depression for decades. Her body bore the physical marks of psychological anguish. Sandra died in 2005 at age 62, her life cut short by the long-term consequences of childhood trauma that her mother had allowed to flourish unchecked. Number 13. Joanna Moore and Ryan O'Neal were both addicted, both failing, both poisoning the same child from different directions. Tatum O'Neal became the youngest ever Academy Award winner at just 10 years old for her role in Paper Moon. At that moment, she should have been experiencing the pinnacle of childhood achievement, a moment of triumph to be celebrated forever. Instead, her Oscar victory became a trauma marker. Tatum's mother Joanna was drowning in addiction, and her father Ryan O'Neal was equally toxic. The household operated under constant chaos. At 6 years old, Tatum was deliberately given alcohol by her mother, exposed to substances that should have been nowhere near a child. When Tatum was nominated for the Oscar, Ryan's response exposed his true character. Rather than celebrating his daughter's achievement, he experienced rage and jealousy. She had upstaged him. She had received the praise that should have been his. In a fit of envy-driven fury, Ryan punched his 10-year-old daughter. Tatum thanked her father in her Oscar acceptance speech anyway, a heartbreaking moment, revealing a child's desperate need for parental approval from a man incapable of giving it. Years of emotional torture followed. By her teenage years, Tatum had spiraled into substance abuse and attempted suicide 3 times. Both children of these addicted parents bore the legacy of 2 people who had failed to protect them from each other or from themselves. Number 12. Lita Gray's mother allowed her child to be preyed upon by Charlie Chaplin for years. Lita met Chaplin when she was just 6 years old, cast in The Kid. From the moment he saw her, Chaplin became obsessed with predatory intensity. He watched her grow from childhood, waiting for her to age just enough for him to act. By age 12, Chaplin continued to cast her in his films, keeping her constantly in his presence. Her mother, aware of Chaplin's reputation, aware of the age gap, aware that her daughter was still a child, allowed this relationship to develop unchecked. There were no protections. There was no intervention. By age 15, after years of grooming and psychological manipulation, Lita became pregnant with Chaplin's child. Rather than face prosecution for statutory rape, Chaplin pressured Lita into marriage. At 15 years old, Lita became the wife of a man in his 50s. The marriage was a prison disguised as legitimacy. Chaplin's behavior during the marriage was controlling and dehumanizing. He dictated every aspect of her life, isolated her from friends and family, and subjected her to emotional abuse. When Lita finally attempted to escape through divorce, Chaplin fought viciously, using his wealth and power to prolong her suffering. Number 11. Dixie Lee and Bing Crosby constructed a household that functioned less like a family and more like a prison camp of psychological torture. The household operated on hair-trigger rules, where even the smallest infractions, whispering between beds before wake-up time, a misplaced toy, a slight inflection in the voice, triggered violent retribution. Housekeepers were allowed to physically beat the boys. Bing himself would administer harsh punishments that crossed far beyond reasonable discipline. Dixie was equally complicit, aligning herself with Bing's authoritarian approach rather than serving as a protective counterbalance. The household became a place where children learned that love was conditional, safety was temporary, and the adults' emotional needs took absolute precedence. In 1977, months after Bing's death, 2 of his sons, Dennis and Philip, took their own lives within 17 months of each other. Both had battled severe depression, addiction, and a deep sense of unworthiness, that they had internalized from childhood. They had survived their father's cruelty only to find that survival meant an empty victory. Gary Crosby, the eldest, survived longer, but spent decades writing about the emotional devastation of a father who seemed to view fatherhood as another role to perform, expertly, publicly, yet devoid of genuine affection. Number 10. Nell Wilson Reagan forced her son to fill the role of emotional caretaker. Ronald Reagan became the 40th President of the United States, a man who shaped American politics during the Cold War. He is remembered as the great communicator, a figure of strength and conviction. Yet his path to power was paved through a childhood marked by parental neglect, and a mother whose priorities were permanently skewed. When Ronald's father descended into alcoholism and instability, Nell made a fateful choice. She would pursue her theatrical dreams and expect her young son to fill the role of emotional caretaker. Ronald was parentified, forced to mature rapidly and to provide emotional support to a woman who was supposed to be nurturing him. He became responsible for managing his father's unpredictable behavior and his own emotional needs. Nell's faith-based worldview created a framework where suffering was spiritualized rather than addressed. Problems weren't meant to be solved. They were meant to be endured and interpreted through a divine lens. Reagan internalized this approach, learning to suppress his own needs, to deflect from pain with humor, and to maintain a positive facade regardless of internal turmoil. Later in life, when Reagan developed Alzheimer's disease, the man who had been forced to be hyper-vigilant to his mother's emotional state found himself losing the very cognitive abilities that had allowed him to manage family dysfunction. Number 9. Catherine Helen Mulholland. Crosby, Bing's mother, created the blueprint for her son's cruelty that would echo through generations. Catherine came from Irish Catholic stock, a woman shaped by strict religious discipline and limited opportunities. She had internalized the message that women's value derived from what their sons could achieve. When Bing showed early promise as a performer, Catherine became obsessed with molding him into a star. Yet her methods were rooted in shame, not encouragement. She used humiliation as a parenting tool, would publicly criticize her son, and compare him unfavorably to other children. Bing learned that love was conditional on performance, and that failure meant being cast out. When Bing eventually succeeded and became a star, he didn't experience relief or vindication. Instead, he had internalized the underlying message: love is conditional on performance. People exist to serve your needs. Power is exercised through control and fear. These were the lessons Catherine had taught him. These were the lessons he would pass down to his own sons. The cycle of abuse had been set in motion generations before Bing had children of his own. Number 8. Gladys Pearl Baker abandoned Marilyn Monroe systematically and repeatedly throughout her life. Gladys had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a severe mental illness that fractured her grip on reality and made her unpredictable and terrifying. Rather than receiving proper treatment or being honest about her condition, Gladys cycled through periods of abandonment, brief reconciliation, and renewed rejection. Norma Jean never knew which version of her mother would appear, the woman who loved her or the woman who didn't seem to recognize her at all. The abandonment began immediately. As an infant, Norma Jean was handed off to foster parents, while her mother pursued her own theatrical ambitions. She would take her daughter back, only to return her to foster care months later. Each time, Norma Jean received the same unspoken message: "You are not important enough for me to keep." In foster homes, Norma Jean was allegedly raped by a foster relative, sexual abuse that should have triggered protective intervention from her mother. Instead, Gladys's response was fragmented and ineffective. She lacked the psychological capacity to be her daughter's protector. By her teenage years, Norma Jean had learned self-medication through pills. Later, as Marilyn Monroe, she would continue this pattern: barbiturates to sleep, amphetamines to wake, alcohol to numb. Marilyn's death in 1962 was officially ruled a probable suicide, involving an overdose of barbiturates, the direct result of addictions that had begun as a response to childhood trauma. Number 7. Ann Miller's mother systematized her daughter's exploitation from earliest childhood. Ann's mother saw her daughter not as a child to nurture, but as a vehicle for wealth and fame. From earliest childhood, Ann was put on stage, dressed, in costumes, and subjected to rigorous dance training. While other children played and explored, Ann was trapped in a cycle of grueling rehearsals and constant pressure to perfect her craft. There was no room for childhood. There was only room for performance. The physical toll was devastating. Stress fractures, shin splints, and chronic pain became normal parts of her existence. Her mother responded not with compassion, but with demands for more training and more hours at the studio. Pain was weakness. Weakness was unacceptable. Ann internalized that her value derived solely from her ability to entertain. Conditional love became the template for her entire life. When Ann finally reached stardom as a teenager and young adult, she discovered something shocking. Success didn't bring the maternal affection she had imagined. Her mother's demands simply escalated. The goalposts moved. There was always another audition, another film, another level to achieve. The hunger for accomplishment was insatiable because it had never been rooted in genuine maternal love. Number 6. Gloria Morgan. Vanderbilt's mother treated her daughter as property rather than a person. Gloria Morgan had married into one of America's wealthiest families, a woman of modest means who suddenly had access to unlimited fortune. When she gave birth to her daughter, Gloria was treated as another acquisition to be managed and controlled. The child was immediately handed to nursemaids and tutors. Her parents took a 10-month trip around the world when she was an infant, leaving her behind without hesitation or remorse. When Gloria's father died from alcoholism, she was left in the custody of her mother, a woman who had never genuinely cared for her. Gloria Morgan became obsessed with controlling her daughter's life, not out of love, but out of a desire for financial control and social dominance. She dictated every aspect of Gloria's existence. When Gloria grew older and began developing her own identity, Gloria Morgan responded with emotional cruelty and manipulation. The custody battle was unprecedented in its scope and brutality. Gloria Morgan fought viciously to maintain control over her daughter's vast inheritance, using the legal system as a weapon. Years of estrangement followed. Number 5. Maria Stepanovna. Zakharenko, Natalie Wood's mother, enabled her daughter's sexual assault to protect a career. When Natalie was just 16 years old, Maria arranged a meeting with Kirk Douglas, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Maria believed a simple endorsement from him could launch her daughter's career even further. She dropped Natalie off at the Chateau Marmont Hotel and waited in the car. Hours passed. When Natalie emerged, she was visibly shaken, disheveled, and traumatized. During those hours, Kirk Douglas sexually assaulted her, a brutal attack that left her terrified and confused. When Natalie tried to tell her mother what had happened, Maria's response was not outrage or maternal protection. It was calculation. Maria told her daughter to suck it up and explained that reporting Douglas would ruin Natalie's career. Fame was more important than justice. Fame was more important than healing. Fame was more important than her daughter's psychological well-being. Natalie eventually blamed her mother directly for her obsession with fame, for normalizing the exploitation, for failing to be a protector when her daughter needed it most. Number 4. Volga Hayworth was powerless to protect Rita from her father's systematic sexual abuse. Rita Hayworth became known as the love goddess, one of Hollywood's most glamorous women. Yet her childhood was unspeakable trauma. Her father, Eduardo, made a calculation that would destroy his daughter. He would exploit her as a dancing partner. He pulled her out of school, dressed her in makeup to look older, and began performing with her under the stage name The Dancing Cansinos, a father-daughter act that masked something far darker. On the road, in hotel rooms and dressing rooms across the Mexican border, Eduardo systematically and repeatedly sexually abused his daughter. Volga was not blind to this. She knew what was happening. According to accounts, whenever Rita returned home, Volga would bring her into her bed, trying desperately to provide comfort and protection. But Volga was penniless, powerless, and drowning in chronic alcoholism. When Rita would describe the horrors she'd endured, Volga could offer sympathy but not salvation. Rita learned at age 12 that mothers couldn't always protect you, that sometimes survival meant enduring the unendurable. Number 3. Margaret O'Brien's mother actually fought back, the one shining example in a story of darkness. In a list of Hollywood's cruelest mothers, there's one story that stands in contrast to all the others. One story where a mother actually fought back. One story where maternal love trumped everything else: fame, fortune, studio pressure, industry threats. Margaret O'Brien was a child star of extraordinary talent, whose performances were so emotionally devastating that even seasoned actors marveled at her gift. Louis B. Mayer, the ruthless head of MGM, saw Margaret as a resource to be exploited. He offered her a contract with minimal salary. But then Gladys O'Brien made a decision. "Her pictures are making money. I gotta protect my child." She stood up to Louis B. Mayer. She challenged MGM's exploitative practices. She refused to allow her daughter to be treated as a commodity. Gladys fought for better compensation, better working conditions, and genuine protection. Years later, Margaret acknowledged the critical role her mother played, how her mother had supported her emotionally on set, helping her access tears through encouragement rather than cruelty or manipulation. Margaret O'Brien survived her childhood without addiction, without severe trauma, without the psychological devastation that defined so many of her contemporaries. Number 2. Lillian Coogan stole her son's fortune in one of Hollywood's most infamous financial heists. Jackie Coogan was a child star before child stardom even had a name. At just 6 years old, he appeared alongside Charlie Chaplin in The Kid, delivering a performance so authentic and emotionally devastating that he became an instant celebrity. By age 8, he was earning astronomical sums, the equivalent of millions of dollars in today's money. He should have been set for life. Instead, his mother, Lillian Coogan, orchestrated one of the most shocking financial crimes imaginable. As Jackie's manager and guardian, Lillian had legal control over his earnings. She was supposed to protect them for his future. Instead, she systematically and methodically stole nearly every penny. She spent them on herself, on luxuries, on property, on a lifestyle that her son's talent had purchased, but her mother's greed had consumed. In 1938, at 23 years old, Jackie did what no child star had done before. He sued his own mother for embezzlement. It was a watershed moment in Hollywood history. The lawsuit was devastating for Jackie, not because he lost, but because he won. The legal battle revealed the full extent of his mother's theft and prompted California to pass the Coogan Law in 1939, mandating that 15% of child actor earnings be set aside in a blocked trust account. Jackie won the legal battle, but he lost his childhood, his relationship with his mother, and the majority of his fortune. Number 1. Ethel Marion Milne wasn't just cruel. She perfected cruelty into a comprehensive system of exploitation. She understood something that every predatory parent in this list understood. A child's talent is an asset to be capitalized on, not a gift to be nurtured. Judy Garland's voice was extraordinary, her emotional depth unmatched, her ability to access vulnerability on command almost supernatural. Ethel saw all of this and made a simple calculation. This can make money. She began by establishing absolute control. Every audition, every film role, every public appearance. Ethel was the architect. Judy was the instrument. This wasn't parenting. It was management. When Judy's natural energy didn't match filming demands, Ethel partnered with MGM executives to begin pharmacological intervention. Pills became the solution to every problem. Too energetic, a depressant. Too tired, a stimulant. Need to control her weight, an amphetamine. Need to ensure she sleeps after being stimulated all day, a barbiturate. By age 10, Judy Garland was chemically dependent, not by accident but by design. Ethel watched this happen and did nothing to intervene. She enabled it. She participated in it. She benefited from it. When Judy became an adult and finally escaped her mother's direct control, the damage was already irreversible. She was chemically dependent on substances she had been given as a child. She had internalized that her body was not her own. She had learned that love was conditional on performance, and that failure meant abandonment. She spent decades battling addiction and psychological devastation. By 1969, Judy Garland was found dead in her bathroom from a probable accidental overdose of barbiturates, the same drugs that had been given to her as a child. But the real cause was Ethel Marion Milne. She perfected the system of abuse. She became the template that every other exploitative mother in this list would follow. 20 stories, 20 mothers, 20 chapters of betrayal, exploitation, and abandonment, written in a language of tears and silence. These aren't just historical footnotes gathering dust in archives. They're warnings. They're reminders that fame demands sacrifice, and that children should never be the currency of that transaction. The damage echoes forward, generation to generation, rippling through decades of broken lives and unhealed trauma. These mothers shaped Hollywood, but their cruelty shaped broken lives that could never be fully mended.